This picture is from a few days ago. I'm recording this in late August of 2020. It represents rockets from Israel's Iron Dome defense system being launched to try to shoot down some rockets from Gaza. As the three videos hopefully made clear, this is an area in which you have population pressures, resource scarcity, two different groups of people living extremely close together, and a long and tendentious history. Um, as of today, there's been over 2 weeks of daily Israel rocket attacks like this. Um, in part, some try to shoot down Hamas rockets like they've been doing for years. Some in retaliation for balloons being launched from Gaza into Israel that have incendiary devices on them to try to start fires in the dry farmland on the Israeli side in order to try to protest the increasing, the longstanding crackdowns on Gaza from the Israeli government. Since Hamas was voted into power in 2006, there's been tensions both between Hamas and Fatah and the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, but also, of course, between Hamas and the Israeli government. There's been one commerce crossing. There's been blockades periodically for many ships being able to land from the sea. The coastline is only 40 kilometers long. It's a small country. Um, but there's been an increasing crackdown because of these incendiary balloons. The Israelis basically shut the border and didn't allow any fuel to go into the power plant that powers Gaza. So Gaza is in daytime right now, but as of last night, it was in darkness because the power plant in Gaza wasn't able to have enough fuel to be able to keep on operating. This is the Middle East. I can't do in any way justice to the complexities of Gaza, let alone Israel-Palestinian conflict. Secretary Pompeo from the United States is due to touch down in Tel Aviv, near Gaza, in a few hours or within the next day or two to try to work on the peace agreement between Israel and the UAE. One of the issues that's held up wider Israeli recognition in the region is, of course, the Palestinian question. The West Bank has lately gotten more attention because of Benjamin Netanyahu's stated plans to take over large swaths of the West Bank and make it Israeli territory, which made any kind of two-state solution less likely. Gaza is one of those areas that doesn't get quite as much attention, but is an ongoing problem for Israel as well as for supporters of the Palestinian cause and the people living in Gaza itself. Daniel Byman in the Brookings Institution has had a recent blog post talking about why there hasn't been ongoing conflict. You see rockets being launched on both sides. I think Israel and Gaza have fought four conflicts just since 2007 or 2008, but it's never really escalated to full-scale conflict. And I think the lessons have been learned on both sides in this long-standing conflict dating back to Israel's creation in the aftermath of World War II in 1948, because from the Israeli side, they don't really have that many good options. That if you replace or remove Hamas, an off branch from the Muslim Brotherhood, now it's its own political force, ended up winning more seats in the Palestinian Legislative Assembly in that 2006 election, which basically means that the legislature hasn't really been active in Palestine since 2007, basically ruling by decree in Ramallah. But So for Israel, the fear is if you get rid of Hamas, something worse is going to take place. Islamic Jihad has also been active in Gaza. Lessons from the Somali case that we talked about earlier today, that you can it can be harder to it can be easier to knock people out of power than to build something up. And on Hamas's side, they want to get attention and negotiated settlement, but they also know that they're disproportionately weak, diplomatically, militarily, economically compared to Israel. But they know with population growth and just the fact that they have this territory, that they are an issue that needs attention. Israel also, as the videos talk about, recognizes the Palestinian population growth outpaces that of Israel. And in Gaza, you have noticeable population growth there that's going to become unsustainable. One of those videos was a bit older, and they said that Gaza was going to be unlivable in 2020. Depends on how you define livable, but you do have almost 20 people living within that small territory. Just as a map, you can see here, both in the context of Israel and then blown up, that you do have a quite small geographic territory that looms large in international politics. 1.9 million, sorry, not 19 million, 1.9 million people in an area of 360 square kilometers, which is less than 1/6 just the size of the ACT. So very small, very dense area, population density of over 5,000 people per square kilometer. ACT's is 151. The median age is 18, so not, according to the CIA fact book, in the other data from back in 2014, they put it earlier, younger at 15. Urbanization is 80%. Unemployment, again, these are rough measures, much higher for women than for men, but male unemployment is still almost 40%. Because of the blockade, because of the difficulty in getting raw materials like cement, there's a lot of tunnels that the Israeli Defense Force will periodically destroy, that have allowed Gazans to try to smuggle things into the country, but it's quite hard to govern and to build back if you don't have the resources to do it, and there aren't enough jobs to go around. The population pyramid, as you see here, is a bit flatter for the 0 to 15 age group, and you still see that traditional flat and large base for the population. You still have a relatively young population. You have low scale, you have high population density, you have lack of access to clean water. That water makes life difficult for the young and the vulnerable within Gaza, but then it also has that follow-on effect that the PBS NewsHour video made clear on Israelis' population nearby, because it is such a small area. What happens in Gaza doesn't necessarily always stay in Gaza. You can see just since the beginning of 2019, there's been a number of different events, rocket attacks, and reprisals in that region. These are the data from the ACLID data project, a source that I haven't spent as much time on in this class so far, more of the UCDP, and you can see there's backgrounds and details on all the different groups, Hamas and their interactions with Fatah and Israel. And so I mentioned that Israel faces a tough dilemma in not wanting to completely get rid of Hamas because they're not sure what's going to replace them, but then also not wanting them to get too strong. I think the Palestinian Authority would also, they've had a lot of difficulties in interacting with the Gaza Strip, in wanting to provide some support for the population there, but not let their political challengers get too strong that they could start to have a broader influence in the West Bank. So you have all these different groups. population growing on both sides of the border, definitely an ongoing issue that's not going to be solved anytime soon, even though Jared Kushner is on the case. But it shows how population pressures can have follow on effects on human security and ongoing risk of conflict and pressures to reach some kind of diplomatic settlement, though there's also benefits in the status quo. So this is just one example of population pressures and low scale conflict. There's a lot of other ones that you could look at if you're interested in population as a topic, population density, youth bulges, and other population dynamics at a smaller scale or a larger scale. But as I said earlier, it's an interesting puzzle that as populations grow larger, you do have increasing population pressures in Gaza. It hasn't escalated. You have population pressures in a lot of other areas that haven't escalated. And what the literature suggests is that you need, like with the environmental scarcity, triggering weak state opportunity dynamics or an inability to provide resources or repress people from revolting, as well as political entrepreneurs that are going to try to take advantage of low opportunity costs or the grievances that might be generated by having these populations without sufficient resources. So yeah, a lot more work on Gaza. It's a fascinating case. If you're interested, I'd be happy to share more resources with you.